During this podcast, we are going to examine our relationship with Spanish speaking in California. We all grew up familiar with English as a Second Language program, which is now referred to as the English Language Development, recognizing a more asset-based approach. I'll get us started. I'm Leah Sabo. My name is from the Old Testament and means weary, which is funny because as a Spanish speaker, I'm very weary. I took 4 years of Spanish in high school and could read and write comfortably, but my pronunciation and speaking were horrible. This was because I was so nervous to speak to people out loud. When I went to Mexico, after being able to write a 5-paragraph essay in Spanish, the only phrase I used was no hablo español. A quote that really impacted me when I was reading De los Rios' languaging article, Translating Coloniality and English Classrooms, was, a translanguaging stance allows student voices, however they emerge, to take center stage. If there had been more teachers with this stance at my high school, maybe my ability to speak Spanish would be much higher.
I have a similar situation like you, Leah. I did take Spanish in high school for Spanish. It was Spanish for non-speakers. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Yvette Salazar, and I am Mexican-American. My last name comes from the Spanish words old tall. My paternal great-grandparents were both from Spain, which I looked up when we were going into the meaning of Spanish words and translanguaging for this podcast. Both of my parents were born and raised in Mexico, in the Mexican states of Jalisco and Mazatlan. I grew up in a Spanish-speaking home, and I became used to speaking, but became confused when I took the Spanish for non-speakers in high school. I realized I didn't know proper Spanish. So when I saw the clip by Dr. Ophelia Garcia, I was able to resonate with something that she was talking about. And so she was talking about how bilingual students have two different worlds, which have different cultural practices, and word linguistic practices as well. So I was noticing that obviously, even though bilinguals are immersed in both languages, I was able to notice that I didn't know proper Spanish while I was still learning English. So it was kind of like confusing for me, and it was kind of like I lacked in some areas in my Spanish speaking, in my Spanish language, and also in my English language. So I was trying to not feel as like lost, even though I know Spanish, but I could only read it and speak it, but not be able to write it.
That breaks my heart that you felt like you couldn't use your language and you were shamed into kind of not using your language. I'm really glad that things are changing in that department. I grew up in Southern California also, and I grew up looking kind of ethnically ambiguous. So especially when I was with my dad, who looks very Latino, we would be approached and people would very rapidly speak Spanish to us. And then we both knew Spanish, but it was very slow and clunky and definitely not native speaking. So that was kind of funny that was kind of our experience. Also, when we went to Mexico, I knew only enough Spanish to speak comfortably with like the toddlers and the 4-year-olds, but they were great teachers because they weren't impatient with me. They didn't laugh at me when I tried to say different words. And I feel like that's what we need to, and they would try to speak some English also, and they weren't ashamed to try. So I think that's kind of what we need to keep, is that like we're born with these language acquisition skills, and we kind of need to keep that lack of embarrassment and keep thinking of it as an asset to be able to learn other words and add them to our repertoire.
Suzanne, I couldn't agree with you more. My name is Laura Stone Carnicero. I'm Spanish American, but I've always actually looked just white. So unlike you, Suzanne, people wouldn't necessarily talk to me in Spanish. They'd be surprised if I knew Spanish. So even though I grew up with babysitters and my mom's Spanish-speaking friends, when I came to school, I didn't have the confidence for writing it or speaking it really, because I didn't really understand the use for it. But I also felt that because it was still my first language, I was a bit slower with English. I didn't really ever understand why until I read the article about emergent bilinguals and how they often don't get put into proper programs or third or fourth grade. They just start being able to put both things together. So I think that's when academics really started making sense for me. I'm still very slow. Reading comprehension is still very difficult, but I definitely think that if we could develop it from a much younger age, it would be so much easier, and I'd be more confident not only in my Spanish, but in my English.
Laura, I cannot agree with you more. Everything that you have shared, I resonate with very, very much. At a very young age, I had a lot of reading and writing comprehensions just due to my schooling. And hello, folks. My name is Natalie Segura. My last name in the English directly translates as safe. As a first-generation Mexican-American, I was raised in a Spanish-speaking household. However, when I was signed up for my classes, for my school, my mother wrote down that I spoke Spanish. So immediately I was placed into ESL classes from first grade till sixth grade. And the school automatically assumed I needed assistance with my English learning by forcing me to take me out of my regular courses and place me in separate classrooms with children who are labeled ESL learners. The reason why they removed me from the original courses is because I did not have good reading and writing skills. I've endured so much struggle to learn adequately. I felt so behind from my own peers, and in high school I played catch up. Unfortunately, I missed important fundamental development for education. I struggled throughout my elementary and high school years because of my Spanish background.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think after all of our stories, hopefully as teachers, we can come out as emergent bilinguals, or even just understanding of emergent bilinguals and how we can teach to both sides of the brain, as Ophelia Garcia said.